So welcome everybody. This is now being live streamed on YouTube as well. This is a 50th anniversary for the temple, or Srila Gurudev 75th?
No, this is 50th anniversary, Prabhu.
50th anniversary for the temple.
The construction of the temple.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you very much, everyone. So welcome to today's Zoom program about the 50th anniversary of the installation of Shri Radha Kalachandji ki Jai.
Hey, Jai.
We have amongst us three amazing devotees. We're meant to have four, but for some reason, well, not for some reason, but Radhanath Prabhu is not doing well in his health. So he'll come on at another date at a later time. But welcome everyone on this call. We're so happy you're here with us. And so today we have three speakers. We have Yashomati Nandan Prabhu, we have Datta Prabhu, and Gopal Prabhu who will be speaking. And we start with Yashomati Nandan Prabhu. And before we start, I will introduce His Grace Yashomati Nandan Prabhu, so that in posterity, and for some of us who may not know about him as much as we should, in posterity people will know who was the speaker and have some identification, because these recordings will be seen many, many years from now, hundreds of years from now as well. People looking back at that time have to have some idea of who was the person speaking. So His Grace Yashomati Nandan Prabhu was born on September 9th, 1958 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He joined the Chicago Temple in October of 1979. His first construction project was remodeling the Lunt Street Temple in Chicago in 1980. Then in April 1980, he moved to Dallas, Texas, and during the next 7+ years, he spent about 4 years in Dallas, with the rest split between the Houston Temple and the Oklahoma Farm Project. Excuse me. His main services were temple construction and general building repairs. Also, each December, assisting in the Christmas marathon. Highlights during that time include 2 to 3 years working on the Dallas Temple Room, altar, and domes. In Houston, remodeling the old Rosalie Street Temple, building the new altar for Shri Radha Madhava, and personally escorting them to their then new home. Also, in 1983, Srila Gurudev asked me to build a float for the Cotton Bowl Parade. Currently, he's staying in New York. Welcome, Yashomati Nandan Prabhu. Please speak. You're muted at the present time. Still muted. Oh, he left. Rasraj left, and you're using his computer. I know that. So let me call him and have him come back so that he can actually help you get it started.
Guruji, I think they rejoined now.
Oh, there he is. There he is. Okay, we got it.
It's been that type of morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you very much.
Very good. Yes. I guess I should start wherever I can remember. It's been over 40 years. And I guess I'm about the last person left who spent a lot of time actually building the temple room. So everything I say will be from my perspective alone. And I wish to do respect to the other 10 or so devotees who also spent an awful lot of time building the Dallas Temple Room. And I believe we are talking specifically about the temple room in general, rather than the overall project, or are we talking about Dallas in general?
Yeah,
Restaurant
in regard to the Dallas Temple, because this is the 50th year anniversary. But we're generally speaking about everything that we can recall, earlier days, etc., about the Dallas Temple.
Okay, well, I'll do my best to do honor to Srila Gurudev's memory, because it was Srila Gurudev's instructions, his desire to establish this unique community where devotees could live close to the temple and practice Krishna consciousness and perhaps a more evolved state as we all age and become family members. And so the temple room was the first of the major projects which allowed us all to have a place where we could gather to worship. And the temple room itself is such an exquisite architectural example that everyone who comes into this room feels a great sense of spiritual presence. Abhipaliyantam Swami, who was the architect of this temple, as well, of course, of Krishna Balaram and Juhu in Bombay and many, many other very, very important ISKCON temples. So I met him in Oklahoma very early in 1980, and I was briefly his personal servant. And he struck me as a very, very cultured gentleman. And he showed me many drawings of his various projects and gave me some brief instructions on architecture in general. So it is due to his expert design that this temple has what is known as perfect vastu. Everywhere you turn, you're struck by the beauty, the dramatic nature of the shadows, the lights, the spaces between objects. Everything creates a very, very pleasing mood to engage in Krishna consciousness. Just like when anyone visits Vrindavan, it's very easy to chant Hare Krishna there. And in this magnificent temple room, it's also very easy to remember Krishna. It's as if the mundane elements that we use become Chintamani. And Pashupati Prabhu, who was the overall chief architect, had a supernatural ability to take mundane, beautiful objects. Using the carvings that we received from India, we had to make molds of dozens and dozens of objects, which were then cast into 3 basic different types of materials, which were then assembled to create the temple room as you see. Each column is composed of 16 different pieces. There's a total of 36 columns. There's over 400 various castings that just create the columns alone. What to speak of the arches, the top boxes, the lower boxes. The altar itself is composed of many, many different cast pieces. And my chief job was basically in the temple room itself. That's where I spent all my time assembling all these various parts that were made in the mold room, in our work room, which is now the inside section of Radha Kalachandji's restaurant. That large area was our workshop. And there devotees like Jai Gopal Prabhu, who was a very expert carpenter, and Jayadev Goswami Das, who was a very expert mold maker, and Nakula Das Brahmachari, who helped a lot with making the molds. It was a combined effort of many people, which ended up being greater than the sum of its parts. It is my feeling and experience that throughout human history, when people combine together for the greater good, they can vastly exceed their own individual talents. And I believe the Dallas Temple Room is such an example. In addition to the people who are involved with the production and assembly and the finishing, there are many, many devotees whose efforts made it all possible. Those involved in temple management, in various fundraising organizations, devotee businesses, Sankirtan, in preaching and bringing guests during the construction phase, which was very inspiring for someone like me while I was working there, to see people come in and admire the work in progress, kept me going day after day as well. So in addition to the devotees I've mentioned, I feel that there are a few other devotees whose names should also be mentioned. I'm sure I'm omitting names of people. Please forgive me for possessing an old man's memory. But of course, Dadadas will speak later. And he is the most expert electrician, and he did all the wiring and lighting to my knowledge. And there was a devotee named Bhakta Steve who did all the upholstery work. And our god brother Sukhananda, who did the ceiling painting. And then our god brother Jagannath Ram, who did the celestial dancers that you see dancing around on the upper areas. And then there were devotees, I remember Damodar Prabhu helped us at some point. I'm sure, I'm forgetting his name. A number of different devotees would show up. And even occasionally we would have a hippie drop in every now and then. And he would, work for a few days on their way to somewhere else. There were some interesting characters over the years who came in and, did a little bit of work here and there. it can become tedious just to hear the process of how we made and assembled the various elements of the temple room. So maybe I should go on to something else. Part of my work later would be I put the new roof on the sanctuary building, and of course that was the first roof I've ever done. And Shulgire was very concerned about my safety, but I promised them I'd take care, and to the best of my ability, I did. And we did that roof in the middle of summer because it needed to be done immediately, and I could not find a crew who could withstand the heat. I was able to find a few very tough men, and we started to work at night. And we set up lighting, and we would work all night, and the police would often show up. And I would just simply say, "Sirs, we're working on a house of worship," and they would allow us to continue. However, one night when I went into the new area that was the most dangerous, I actually fell through the roof, but I was able to catch myself on my elbows and one of my legs, and I had to yell to the crew, "Don't try to rescue me," because I don't know what's going on around me. Anyway, I was able to pull myself out of that hole, and with some scratches and cuts, but I was fine. But it reminded me to be careful at every moment. I did some other things that were probably not advisable in the modern age, but we didn't have money. So at one point I had to rewire the whole building without turning off the power to the street, because that $800 was a lot of money to us at that time. So I waited until 2 in the morning and then reconnected these massive cables and rerouted the wire to where we needed them. I did not have a lot of involvement with the temple restaurant. I was probably away on Sankirtan at that point. But I did come back and retransplant the new tree that's there now, because the first tree was diseased and didn't survive very long. And another one of my contributions to the Dallas temple was I remodeled Prabhupada's museum. I believe that was in '86. So, and in that endeavor, Gopal Prabhu was always with me, and as well as with the Cotton Bowl Parade float. I couldn't have done it without the help of devotees like Gopal. And we also had a godbrother named Dhruva who chipped in. And we worked in the coldest December in recorded Dallas history. It was roughly 10 degrees every day, and we were working outside. So that was hard to forget. And it was a very interesting project in that it turned them on the devotees. And then the local news stations started picking up on the story, and they broadcast several stories about us being in the Cotton Bowl Parade And many of the other float builders said that there was maybe the most beautiful float ever built. And I don't doubt it, because we probably built the most expensive float, and we worked very hard on it. And it was so attractive that they used the float to run the credits at the end of the parade that year, and then used our same float to advertise for the Cotton Bowl Parade the following year, although they would not allow us to return. There we go. Look at that. I maxed out the dimensions to just barely fit width, height, and depth. We have dozens of devotees on this float. It has detachable wings, so it could get through the door. Radhanath Prabhu is underneath there breathing too much carbon monoxide. Unfortunately, there were technicalities of float building that were unknown to me at the time. And unfortunately, I made other devotees miserable in my inexperience, but all in all, it was a beautiful project that I was very proud to be part of. Excuse me. One of my favorite elements of the Dallas temple that I personally contributed to was the stained glass peacock in the peacock room. It's kind of, a lot of devotees don't even seem to be aware of it, but it's a very effective preaching tool. Every time someone goes in there and sees it, they're impressed by the devotee's ability in general to create objects of beauty in Krishna's service. So I would advise everyone to take more advantage of that. Let's see, what else can I say? When I first came to work on the temple, Shri Radha Kalachandji were at the opposite end of the temple in a big particle board temporary altar, and I worked on the altar itself at first, and that was where I started. And then once we finished the altar, Radha Kalachandji were moved on to their new altar. However, at that point I was gone, so I didn't see that actually happen. And I returned just in time to help disassemble their old altar and start on the room. The work was done, the curved walls. And because sanding sheetrock is not everyone's favorite job, I was put to, that was one of the first things that I was able to do. And I had brought a piece of equipment from my auto body years, a long flat sander, which worked beautifully on those curved walls. So that was very satisfying. And then we began to cover everything with the various pieces of moldings and started to assemble the columns. And Pashupati Prabhu, in general, he would work with me, and we would do the arches. And then generally it was kind of left to me to finish out the projects, to finish out the columns, for example, which must have taken 6 months to assemble. And I remember at one point I'd put up about 4 columns over the course of a week or two, and Srila Gurudev came in and he said, next month I want to see 8 columns. So I tried to keep on schedule and increase productivity and effectiveness throughout some processes. I remember the arches overhead, for example. I was on 3 levels of scaffolding, not the most secure in the world. One would have to move slowly, but I wasn't too afraid of heights, so that was all an adventure. And then I remember Pashupati had an idea for the finishing of all the elements with various types of wood grain materials. And we worked that you see now. And then again, it was kind of turned over to me as the columns were assembled and dried. I would take over the finishing, and I know there were other devotees as well who ended up doing a lot of the finishing work. But basically, it seemed that once a process was established, it was sort of turned over to me, and I would either do it or oversee its production. Same is true with the floor. We did the large area first, and then Pashupati and I figured out how to do the trim. And then I remember doing the trim around the floor, the border pattern and the small tiles that lead out to the benches. And to do that, I had to wait basically till the morning program was over. And then I would start and work until about 2 or 3 in the morning, and then sweep and mop the floor so the devotees could have Mangal Arati, etc. And then I would take some rest and then start again, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. And some of our equipment was less than ideal. I remember we had an old big table saw that probably saw service in World War I, if not World War II. And it was affectionately known as the finger chopper around the floor. And every day I would count my fingers, and I had 10 at the end of every day. Although occasionally a piece would pop out of there, and fortunately none of them, I would wear safety glasses. So I got a few nicks and scratches from working with that thing, but I survived. And it was, in all, I would say it was some of the most satisfying years of my life. I woke up every morning excited that I would be able to work on the temple again. I didn't have to think about anything else except what can I get done to please Srila Gurudev and to advance the rooms in the world. I've lived in New York City for 30 years. So as you can imagine, I worked for the rich, the famous, the crazy. And I have been in many, many, many exquisite buildings in one of the most famous cities in the world. And I can honestly say there's very little that can even match or come close to the beauty of Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji's temple room.
Yay.
Can I stop there?
Yes, you can. Thank you so very much, Yash Prabhu. We have people who will want to ask you questions, so please. After the others have spoken, then we'll open it up for question and answers, so that we'll churn this nectar more.
I hope my response was satisfying.
Very, very. Thank you so very much. That was amazing. That was really very good. Thank you so very much. So now we'll bring on His Grace Datta Prabhu. His Grace Datta Prabhu joined His Grace Jayananda Prabhu and His Grace Gurudas Swami's Radha Damodar's traveling Sankirtan party, bus party, in September 1975 In 1976, the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party joined forces with the New York Temple. And also, in the spring of that year, he was initiated in Vrindavan by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. After spending time during Sankirtan and also working on that temple, he would, up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, running the Radha Damodar Sankirtan Party bus building crew, and also working on construction at the Harrisburg farm. Datta Prabhu took Brahmin initiation from Srila Prabhupada while there. Srila Prabhupada passed from the earthly plane later that year in the fall of 1977. The bus building center was closed, and Datta Prabhu was sent to travel with Tripurari Swami for some time before being sent to work on the new St. Louis temple. His Holiness Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj arrived, and after staying in St. Louis for some time, took to preaching on the road and took Datta Prabhu as his driver and right-hand man. Datta Prabhu considers that time as one of the best in his life. He later became assigned to Radha Kalachandji Dham, where he worked on the new temple construction and restaurant. Later, he started a restaurant in Austin, went to Europe, was president of the new Brajamandala farm community, and was there for about 7 years. He was also president of the International Committee for Self-Sufficiency at that time. Datta Prabhu has completed engineering on 5 continents. Since 2006, he has been giving workshops worldwide on speaking, writing, and running one's business as a spiritual practice. Datta Prabhu has written 2 books with spiritual themes. The first one, Different, that's the title, Different, has won 12 literary awards. The second one, which is called The Reluctant Visionary, is due in early 2023. Welcome, Datta Prabhu. We're so happy to have you with us. Please.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank
Hare
you
Krishna.
for having me, everyone. And I appreciate especially Mother Shaibia, who went to so much trouble to do this and put it all together. But thank you. And I'm sorry to have been so there's just a lot going on. I've had a lot going on, but that's no excuse for being difficult. And that's been part of my history. And that was, and I just want to start off, being difficult is part of my history. And I just want to start off that, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he's one of my favorite things about Krishna consciousness and always will be. And, the time that I spent traveling with him, he was my mentor, he was my friend. And I just, I think of him with love practically every single day. And I met him when Radha Damodar, Nityananda Prabhu was mentioning about when Radha Damodar traveling party merged with New York Temple, big event for all of us. And he was there. And my first interaction with him, I've been doing Sankirtan, and I did Sankirtan in the wrong place. I did Sankirtan in Port Authority, which you're not supposed to do. Like everyone knows, you're not supposed to do it. But somehow I was asleep when the memo went out. So I went in there. And I got in a tremendous amount of trouble, and I had to go see Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And it was a big deal because we could have lost permission, right, to distribute books in Port Authority. And so it had to be done in a certain way at a certain time, and whole story there. But I just remember that I was in big trouble, but he was so caring about me. And that was my he cared. He really cared. I mean, anyone that's been chastised by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you'll never forget it, right? But the thing is, there's that underlying love behind it was always there, that care for others. And from that time, then I went out, Nityananda Prabhu mentioned, so I was doing the bus building crew, traveling Tripura Mirage, doing different things. And I would get assigned to working on temples. And I was working on the St. Louis temple and had the St. Louis temple. We did a lot of work there. And then we heard that Tamal Krishnamurti was going to come there. And so it was a marathon. Yasa, you know what marathons are like when you're working on temples. It's like day and night.
I don't know what a marathon isn't.
That's funny. So we're working day and night, and then Tamal Krishnamurti came, and as I started saying, it was, and I have the thing, yeah. So you can also confirm this if you want, but I have a tendency. I have a history of rubbing people the wrong way, rubbing devotees the wrong way, and at the time I didn't even know why or how I was doing it, but.
I avoided that, Mercy. You never rubbed me the wrong way.
Well, thank you.
We got along very well, I thought.
Good. I thought so too, and I still think so. Anyway, so Tamal Krishnamurti came, and it was this, it was a major turning point for me, because it was just, we connected right away, and he was so appreciative of all the things that we had done, all the work that we had done in the temple, and just such a, I'm going to start crying here. That's okay. That's
I'll
okay.
pass you the tissues.
Yeah, good luck. So he came there, and he was there for a few months, and then he went traveling on the road, and he said, I want to take Dada with me. And I remember they've always, look, you can take anybody else. You can take whoever you want. It's like, really, seriously, you don't have to. No, I want to take Dada with me. So, and that started, a few years history of traveling with him. And then while I was traveling with him, he would loan me out to projects all the time. For example, Lunt Street with Yasso. So I was there and doing electrical and HVAC, that's heating, ventilation, air conditioning. And same thing with the Evanston temple. So, worked there. I think you also worked there and right in Evanston, didn't you, Yasso?
I joined there, and then we immediately got the Lunt Street property.
Oh,
So
got it.
I might have been there when it was destructed or deconstructed.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so yeah, he would, and I think I can say this. I'm going to say it. So Sukra and Shivaram Maharaj, they were there. So I was sent to work on the Evanston temple, and somehow I just offended everybody. I honestly, to this day, I can't say how I did it, but I remember Shivaram Maharaj complained to Tamal Krishnamurti about me, and I don't remember why. I don't remember what I did, but and he was, he just dealt with it so well, because he had sent me in there to do, fix the temple up, and I was doing it with Pashupati. Pashupati was one of my best friends. And we had fixed it up, and I don't know where the complaint was coming from, but I do remember, and I'm sure it was me. I'm sure it was, some stupid thing I had done or said or acted. I don't know, but I remember how Tamal Krishnamurti dealt with it in such a way that he made everybody happy, and he didn't just, kind of brush things under the rug or whatever. And he just talked to me later about, what I didn't do. Now I remember he was like, you didn't actually do what they're saying. It's like, no, I didn't. And I hadn't. And again, it was just, he was just so amazing with me. Like I said, it's just, it was such a wonderful experience for me in my experience. So sometime after Evanston, I don't remember the timeline, then I got assigned to the Dallas project, and working with Yasu and Pasupati, and there was Jayagopal, and I remember there was what Pashupati called plain Gopal. In his thick French Canadian accent. And that was, of course, the illustrious Gopal Prabhu, who is here with us today. And there was many others. And yeah, so thank you for mentioning everyone, because I didn't remember half of those people. There you go.
Jayadev Goswami was the master mold maker.
Yes. Yes.
And we burned through the molds. We had to replace some of the, like the lions were particularly complicated, and the giant elephant heads are very hard molds to make.
And that was simply amazing that you guys did such a great job on that. And I just had the easy part. So I just did all the electrical and the heating and the air conditioning. We one of my first, I'd never done a commercial air conditioning. We had a 20-ton unit up on the roof through the hottest summer in Dallas history. And I worked on that all August. And for the whole month of August, the high temperature never was below 100. I'm not saying that to whine. It just sounds like I'm whining. And anyway, so that was my thing. So I did all the technical stuff. And the city, this is what a lot of people don't remember or maybe knew about at the time. The city was so cooperative with us. They were so helpful and supportive. It was actually surprising. So they let me get my electrician's license. So I sat for the test, passed the test, got my master electrician's license, so I could, do the actual work legally. And it was just, it was an exciting project. Everyone was so excited about it. They were so, wow, this is so going to be so amazing. And we actually didn't know how amazing it was going to be. Surabir Abhipalayantam, Surabi Swami, who we called, was the architect who came in to help us. And then, of course, Pashupati, he was the functional architect on the project, as you said. Yeah. So, and there was just so much, there's so much cooperation, and everyone, there was obviously always little things going on, but everyone's very cooperative and helpful with each other. A little, yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah, just a little here and there. And so I remember, in fact, so we bought a church which we're converting to a retreat center here in Colorado. And there's stained glass, and I've been telling everybody, there's this guy who did this stained glass peacock in Dallas, Texas, that is just so amazing. And it's just so, and people see that and they just get a big wow, and that's what I think art should be. It should really give people not just a wow, but give them a chance to look, deeper within themselves, which I think that peacock did. And it just reflects, I just want to say, so you're just such an amazing artist. You're such an amazing artist, and everything you did was art between, whether it was, where'd he go? Whether it was the, whether it was working on those columns or doing all those different pieces or all the framing and things like that. I mean, it's like we had those transparencies with the backlighting and stuff. So, I got to do, a lot of the nuts and bolts, but you got to do most of the art. So that's just, that was just incredible.
Do you remember what Pashupati would call us from time to time? He wanted to call us an orangutan, so he called us a hornge ting. Stop acting like a hornge ting.
Yeah, no, that sounds just like Pashupati. Yeah. So, yeah, and I did a lot of the, a lot of the power, like a lot of the, feeders and everything like that, and then a lot of the control for the lights. And I remember, I don't know if it still exists, but I did a thing where, we had that beautiful painted ceiling, and it was the clouds and the sky, and then we had it set so it would have like one side or the other. Is this still like that with the sunset, sunrise?
That's one of the most stunning features of the lighting. Is one of the most stunning. Prabhu, your lighting job is extraordinary.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to do it for the greater cause.
Same in the Houston temple. Such a superb job.
Thank you.
Just thought I'd add that.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I love doing it. It was my thing. So Yeah, and then boy, and I don't remember. I know I was not there for the completion of the restaurant. I did some of the work on it in terms of again, the power and the air conditioning and all the stuff there, the kitchen, because we had to do a lot to upgrade the kitchen for the restaurant. And then I went for years. I was in Spain for many years. And then I came back. I'm just, the timeline is fuzzy and I don't know if it really matters much anyway, but I came back at a certain point to do the power. So there was a question. So outside Tamal Krishna Maharaj's, right outside his quarters, there was these huge transformers, right? And the power all came into his thing there. And he asked me, he says, Dada, he says, is this dangerous? And I said, well, it's a matter of opinion. I think it is, because the EMFs that come off that power, it's right there, right? Like, 3 feet from where you're working. It's in my opinion, it's just not a good thing. He says, well, what can you do about it? I said, well, it's a big deal to move the power away from the building and then you have it come in a different way. And he says, well, can you do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. So, and I was living in Oregon at the time. So I came down to Texas for some time to do that. That's that little building that's out behind the temple.
In the parking lot now.
Is it part of the parking lot now? Yeah. Oh, that's kind of funny. So I did that, but here's the funny thing. So, in that conversation with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, so it was the United States government, some agency in the United States, I think it was the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, where they said, yes, this is very dangerous. We have a high degree of leukemia of people living near power lines, and EMFs are bad. They're bad news. And I mentioned that to him, that it had just come out like a month before. So, he green-lighted the project. I'm there in the middle of the project, the US government and all their boundless wisdom reneged and said, oh, we had bad data. Actually, it's not harmful at all, because what happened is they realized that everyone that got leukemia that's living under a power line, and they're going to have billions of dollars worth of lawsuits. So they said, actually, it's not bad. It's not harmful.
Yeah.
And of course, and somebody told Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So he called me in and said, Dada, I just heard this wasn't harmful. So we had a very interesting discussion. And I said, I told him why. I said, they're just backpedaling because they don't want to get, billions of dollars of lawsuits. And he was totally good with it. So that was a great pleasure doing that work. And then at some point, what year, I moved back to Radha Kalachandji Dham in, hang on here. The memory is
87, I think.
I thought it was 86.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah, it could be. No, you know what? Because my son was, no, you're right. No, Austin, yes,
our children were born around the same time.
Yeah.
Same midwife.
Yeah.
I drove them both to the same midwife.
Oh, I didn't even remember that part. So your memory is much better than mine. Much better. But so he was born in 88. So it was 87 when I moved back there. And and I just love being part of that community. And I love having, had the opportunity to work on that project. And, I feel like I'll always be a part of that Radha Kalachandji community.
Haribo.
Haribo.
I would like to interject for 1 minute.
Go ahead, please.
Please.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I've heard on numerous occasions from devotees, they say, oh, New Vrindavan has the same temple. That kind of, without trying to be, we gave them our molds in about 83, 84. They came and we gave them the molds. I believe Tamal Krishna Goswami said, fine, let them take the molds, let them make a beautiful temple. I just want to point out, because they altered the proportions, it does not have the same effect. It is not as beautiful as Radha Kalachandji Dham. and we built ours first. Haribo.
Yes. Thank you for interjecting that.
I've heard this multiple times.
Yeah, no, it's not the same temple, and can I just be honest and say it's not even close?
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. It lost the Vastu. It loses a lot of the feng shui when they elongated the columns. Now the
Yeah.
proportions are off. It's not nearly as dramatic.
Yeah, it's got more gold leaf.
I've
but
been there.
yeah.
I walked in right after they did it and said, no, it's not Radha Kalachandji down.
No, yeah, no, that's
Oh, and the finish isn't as nice either. They didn't do the careful wood grain finish that we did, which is a big part of it.
yeah. Well, and that was the thing too. And that was the thing too about, you and Pashupati, but you guys are both perfectionists.
We were heartists. We were heartists.
Yeah.
Artists, yeah. And a little tiny, I think the best artists have to be a little obsessed. I'm not attaching that to you necessarily, Yaso, but you have to be a little obsessed to be a really good artist, I think. And now he's frozen. I froze him. There he goes.
Yeah, obsessive.
Somewhat. I think the best artists are. I mean, I know that as a writer, those are my 2 books there. As a writer, you got to be a little obsessed to write well.
Pashupati and I were both left-handed as well.
Oh, I see. I didn't even remember that. I remember Pashupati was. Yeah.
We're both in our right minds.
Yeah. Very cool. And Gopal, I do remember you because the thing is, a lot of times Gopal would ask, okay, what am I going to do? And they'd assign him to me, and I'm sure he was going. So I really do appreciate you. Helped me a lot, Gopal. Prabhu.
I love that. I love being able to help you with anything you did.
You were always a silent partner, Gopal. You were always right there and just doing what needed to be done. You have to excuse me for 1 second.
That's my thing.
Yeah.
I like being the silent partner. Yeah, I remember helping with some minor things when you were on that barth, doing some little things, but I can't remember what. I just remember being in Chicago with the barth and.
Oh, we did so many upgrades. So for everyone who doesn't know, the barth, that was Tamal Krishna Maharaj's motorhome. It was a little compact motorhome, and I got to drive it and maintain it. And then I come up with these crazy ideas. Oh, we can just do this, and then he'd be like, "Yeah, do it." And then I had Gopal to help me a lot. So Gopal Prabhu, excuse me. And I'm not going to call you plain Gopal because you're just so not plain.
Well, you can, there was a period of time when I was serving Srila Gurudev in Hong Kong, and I got a different nickname, Slow Paul. So I'm okay with nicknames.
Oh, that's funny.
Slow Paul.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think here. Yeah, you were involved with everything. I remember you came down to Houston.
Oh, yeah.
Wired all of those huge chandeliers in the domes for the
at the new Houston temple, yeah.
Yeah. And I got to help you with that. You went and picked out the chandeliers. They fit perfectly. I mean, that was just stunning. That was really good. And the way you set it up so that it wouldn't just be the whole chandelier coming on. There would be different alternating lights of different domes. And it was so expert. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm trying to think what I did. Yeah, I may as well add some things about the minor contributions. I remember one time painting in the restaurant can I interject now, or do you?
Oh yeah, go for it. Go for it.
This is easier.
I want to make sure that Dr. Prabhu finishes before you.
Oh, I'm totally good.
Please interject as often as you want to. Are you done, Dr. Prabhu?
Yeah.
Okay, then
I
before
want
you
to hand the baton to Gopal Prabhu.
Yeah, I want people to know about you, Gopal Prabhu, before they hear from you, because there are
Okay,
others,
okay.
200 years from now who wonder who is Gopal Prabhu,
They'll be saying, why did that guy get on there?
Before we go there, thank you so very much, Dr. Prabhu. That was so nice. It's
Hi,
like
Dada Prabhu.
Pleasure.
all of us who are devotees here owe a unrepayable debt of gratitude for the wonderful temple that you have set up. And all of us are today having this huge privilege of serving Sri Radha Kalachandji, the deities on the altar, and all the devotees in such a way that, we're feeling ecstasy, we're feeling true ecstasy, and all the pain that you all suffered at the time because you had nothing to start with, in the sense that you had a broken down building pretty much. I mean, it wasn't like you had a very nice building to work with and you were going to dress it up a little. It was pretty much, you really brought that building to life and turned it into a dharma, like that. So we just want to thank you so very much for that. Thank you for telling us some of the things we never heard before, which we always love hearing. It's nectar to us when we hear anything about Radha Kalachandji Dham that we've never heard before, and whatever we hear again, it sounds even better the second time we heard it, the third time we heard it. It just becomes better and better and better every time. Thank you so very much. So now introducing Gopal Prabhu. His Grace Gopal Prabhu joined ISKCON in Evanston, Chicago Temple in winter of 1978. He received his Bhakti training in Detroit Temple while serving Sri Radha Kunji Bihari. He moved to Texas and joined His Grace Pashupati Prabhu to assist in remodeling the sannyas guest quarters in Houston, Texas, and the Rosalie Street Temple for their Lordships Sri Nitai Gaurachandra and Sri Nitai Chaitanya Chandra. And there he briefly met His Divine Grace Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami. Jai. Srila Gurudev, I'm sorry, I'm going to read that again. And there he briefly met His Divine Grace Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami, Srila Gurudev, for the first time, just as he was being sent back to Chicago for similar remodeling service, meaning Gopal Prabhu was being sent back to Chicago for similar remodeling service. After a year of serving in various ways, Sankirtan treasurer, book distribution, and Sankirtan in downtown Chicago, at O'Hare Airport, and in Canada, he received Diksha initiation in the presence of our Lordships, Sri Kishore Kishori, and devotees from Srila Gurudev, His Divine Grace Tamal Krishna Goswami, in January 1980 in Chicago, in front of the devotees as well. He continued to serve Srila Gurudev in whatever capacity required for his pleasure, such as temple president for almost 6.5 years in the farm project in Oklahoma, known as New Kurukshetra, or otherwise as Harmony Farm. Traveling about the USA, performing Sankirtan town to town from vans. Assisting Srila Gurudev in Kowloon, Hong Kong, as he worked to legalize ISKCON there. Assisting in temple and altar construction and preparations for the arrival of Sri Radha Neela Madhava in Houston, Texas. Assisting His Grace Assisting His Grace Yashomati Nandan Prabhu in building the Cotton Bowl parade float for the pleasure of Sri Radha Kalachandji in Dallas, Texas. Currently, he is serving at Sri Radha Kalachandji, a temple in Sri Radha Kalachandji Dham, Dallas, with his family. Welcome, Gopal Prabhu, please.
Hare Krishna. Okay, let's see if I have any little tidbits to add.
You were interjecting something and I really cut you short.
I mean, it was probably nothing of pertinence, but
Oh, come on.
I do remember visiting, every now and then I would be commissioned to come and help for a few days or whatever. When I was living on our farm in Oklahoma, to come down to Dallas and maybe assist in little things having to do with the temple room or the temple room, not so much. I mean, the main thing I did there when I would be visiting, Srila Gurudev would ask me to go sleep in the temple room because the deities were on the other end and there was no protection. And he was concerned, you know, if some vagrant came walking in. So I slept on the floor in the temple room and felt very happy that I was able to do that. In the restaurant, I remember one night working, there's this, the little gazebo, you step up in there and it's got the little special chair and I was working on the roof, and the roof originally was something different than it is now. I think it was more of a dome or something like that. And I was working on top and it was starting to get late and a little bit dark. Well, not quite dark, but I was working late. And Srila Gurudev came to the window of the sanctuary up there and looked out. Said, "Oh, Gopal, what are you doing?" I'm trying to make this roof, Srila Gurudev. He says, "Okay, that's very good." He said, "Don't stop tonight until you get it finished." So I was thinking to myself, there's no way I can get this thing. But I kept on working, and it must have been, everybody else left. I was probably out there around 10 o'clock at night trying to fulfill his desire, which was not going to happen. And he came to the window again. He looked out. He says, "Oh, you're still out there." He says, "Oh, you can go take rest now." So I remember that. And then another time I was working in the painting the ceiling on a scaffold with Jayagopal, where they were going to have a salad bar. It was like a cart salad bar, a little island salad bar. And it was a very simple paint. And, you know, painting is not that difficult, I guess. And I thought, okay. Anyways, we're both up there with rollers painting on the ceiling. And Srila Gurudev walks in. And he looks up there. He says, "Gopal, what are you doing?" He says, "Don't paint like that." I looked a little puzzled. He says, "Paint like Jayagopal." He says, you're doing it all wrong. And he said, "I guess painting is just not your forte." So anyways, Jayagopal was more expert at everything. I will grant you that, even to this day.
And you were probably one of the most dedicated, committed, determined people I've ever met, Gopal Prabhu. I'm just gonna say that.
I was, you know, I do like to think that I try in that regards. And you know, one devotee told me that Srila Gurudev had said when I got initiation that Gopal will do anything I ask.
Yeah.
So I always liked that he felt that. Okay, let me see what else.
Well, the proof of that is that you worked with me for a while. That proves your dedication.
You were,
Yeah,
you were pretty intense.
You think?
Yeah.
Moi.
That's something we might have in common, yeah. So
In
Oh.
Houston, Yas would keep us going until they were coming in for Mangal Arti. Almost every day when we were preparing the altar in the temple room for Shishi Radha Nilamadava's installation. So yeah, it was, and man, it got pretty, it was difficult. I'll admit, I mean, I was younger and we could do the hours like that, but to maintain a proper sadhana of chanting and things like that, no, that was near impossible. Anyways, Gurudev kind of knew about that.
Especially when your fingers were frozen doing the cotton ball parade float.
That was intense too.
How cold?
Yeah, you should-
How cold was that?
I mean, yeah, I remember we were working right out there in Kalachandji Park originally. And devotees would come by and bring some little Maha sweets.
Oh, really? I
remember
don't
that?
remember that.
Yes, you do. Okay.
Give that to that tall Prabhu.
Yeah, give that to the tall blonde with a.
I was fueled by Maha.
When I was in Chicago, when we were moving the deity, this is about Gurudev in construction too, but Srila Gurudev was in, at the present time, when we were working at the Lunt Street Temple, he was doing a Fiji tour where he created those gods, demigods, and incarnation video. And so he returned to see the progress in Chicago. And I was laying this floor in the basement. It was a huge basement, right? Where we had the, I guess the kitchen was down there and Prasadam Hall. And the
at Lund
floor
Street?
was the
Yes.
floor were these 12-inch ugly orange vinyl tiles, but it was really cheap, I think. So I was laying that whole floor. I don't know what, but I just remember I laid this practically the whole floor, as I recall, by myself. And way over, you'd enter in one corner and walk through the kitchen or near the kitchen and then leave the other corner. And on the other furthest corner away from anything, there was this little, like maybe an 1/8-inch gap between a couple of these tiles that just somehow I couldn't correct, or I don't know what. I just wasn't that good at laying tile. So Srila Gurudev returns from the Fiji tour, and he's got a whole entourage surrounded with him. And I remember Pagosh walking in carrying his danda, Srila Gurudev, and I can't remember who else. And he comes walking in there to inspect. And instead of just walking in a straight line and looking at what's in front of him and walking through the next door to leave, he walked all the way over to the other corner and looked down and pointed at that one gap. And he says, "What is this?" And I'm like, oh my God. So, anyways, he was very, always very observant, and somehow
He always would notice the details.
he would notice the things. Yeah.
Right, but and the great thing about him was that he'd notice the right and wrong details. Like he'd notice things you did right, but he'd also notice those 1/8-inch gaps that weren't supposed to be there.
On that note, one time when I was working in the Houston temple, Gopal, you would remember this, I got the curtains a few days earlier and I hung them on a 2x4 from the ceiling in the corner of the Houston temple. And Srila Gurudev walked in and he goes, "Whose idea was that?" And I said, "Oh, that was mine, Srila Gurudev." And he said, "Oh, that was a good idea." I didn't think that was the answer I was going to get.
You remember,
Excuse me for one.
no,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, were you involved with any of the construction of the apartments on our farm in Oklahoma? I mean, you were there during that time.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I had a
And
lesson in that box.
The morning classes Srila Gurudev would give on the back porch at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Would be dark in the middle of winter. Those were
the back porch on that farm with Srila Gurudev was some of the best memories in Krishna
weren't they?
consciousness.
Absolutely.
And when we would read Krishna book every night, and that became my service, where I would read Krishna book almost every night when I was there.
Bottom in the afternoons, where he would sit with all of us,
and then in the mornings, I remember in the mornings he would sit with us and he would like tease individual devotees, and he would ask, "What are you going to do today? What are you going to do today, Prabhu?" And then Garuda was talking about the horses so much one time. Gurudev said, "Garuda, you would think that horse is ready to give a Bhagavatam class."
There was this one morning, I tell this story, but I'm sure some of the listeners haven't heard it, but we were having class early in the morning. It's pitch dark outside. It's just a screened in back porch. And we're all sitting there, and every now and then devotees would start to doze off. And he would, like I remember particularly Guru Guranga. And Srila Gurudev says, "Could you stand up?" And he would stand up, and then he would start to doze off again. Standing up, and Gurudev would have it and say, "Okay, now stand on one leg." And Jagopal would be sitting right next to him with a little recorder to record the classes. And one morning, Srila Gurudev was speaking, and he paused between sentences, and you heard this. And he looked next to him, Jagopal over there nodded away and snoring. Here you go. And Srila Gurudev nudges him and says, Jayagopal, wake up. And he says, wow. He says, what are you doing? He says, and he goes, the sages of Naimisharanya sat for thousands of years hearing Bhagavatam. And you can't sit there for 45 minutes. Jayagopal's like, yeah, Srila Gurudev. But I bet the sages of Naimisharanya never had to perform construction work. And Gurudev had this big grin on his face, and he all looked at us. We all cracked up. He appreciated that. Gurudev always had a sense of humor.
Yeah, he definitely did. And one of the things I really love about him is that he was not afraid to go against the grain. And he was not afraid to do things differently, and he was not afraid to try new things and see how this works. And you know, at that time, what years am I talking about? Like in 79, probably. Like there was a big, you know, there would be a distinction between Sankirtan devotees and regular devotees, right? And his philosophy was devotees are devotees. You know, no matter what, the service does not matter. And he was really adamant about that. He was really adamant. And that was kind of a controversial thing in ISKCON in general within the GBC. You know, and as you know, he didn't mind, you know, kicking the hornet's nest, so to speak. And one of the things that he did was at the farm in the early days, he had a lot of the, you know, Sankirtan. There was Sura and Pragosh and a lot of different, you know, the big Sankirtan devotees that had joined our zone, who thought they'd be going out in the airport, and they're out in the Oklahoma woods with chainsaws with the rest of us, you know, clearing land, and you know, and that was great. And I remember some of the criticism that came from some of the other GBC members and other sannyasis and other temple presidents and whatever. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj would just be, you know, his whole attitude was, it's not that he was very sensitive. It's when somebody would criticize, he'd feel it. But he was like, you know, this is what I think Prabhupada wants me to do, and he would do it. And I just have the utmost respect for that. And that's one of my, you know, I was not involved in the construction later at the Oklahoma farm, but I was out there with the chainsaws with the Sankirtan devotees clearing land, and that was something.
Amazing
Fun.
project. Amazing.
Fun with chainsaws. Chaitanya Chandra's got a nasty scar in his leg from that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, he
we
was
built
there
that
too.
fence. We ran into a tornado one time on the way back to Dallas in the middle of the early morning. I couldn't see the thundercloud, and I just drove right into a tornado. And
Wow.
the van almost flipped over, and it got louder, and we were at a dead stop in the middle of the highway. The rain just stopped the van in the middle of the highway, and we were chanting, and then all of a sudden the van started to tip as the winds got even louder, and soon he couldn't hear anything. And all of a sudden I heard, what was that sound? And I turned to see if Chaitanya Chandra heard it, and it was him screaming the Lord Nrsimha. So for 5 or 10 minutes, we withstood the van almost flipping back and forth, and then we drove off to Dallas, and we were okay.
Wow.
But that was
And
memorable.
I bet it is. And we're so glad he didn't wind up in the land of Oz.
Yeah, the prasadam there isn't nearly as good as here in the Dham. But, and now that and poisonous snakes. Why did there have to be snakes? Flipping over a hay bale one time, and a copperhead came out of that bale and just missed my face.
Wow.
And then we would be baling hay. It would be that was fun. Chaitanya Chandra, he was the second to the last man standing.
Wow.
It was tough too. But anyway, we had a lot of hay that became valuable later, right, Gopal? During the drought. I believe we were one of the only farms who had made hay while the sun shined.
Right. All right. Yeah. So were you there during the flooding of the farm?
Oh, how could I forget?
That was a great winter. that was a fantastic winter. The whole
Best,
property
best winter I ever had.
was something. Anyways, that's a whole nother
Oh, yeah.
segment.
That and the Beaver Dam
The Beaver Dam. Yeah.
and the lake.
Yeah, and the thousands of geese and ducks that hung out there all winter because the water was flooded down there.
Yeah.
You go out on the back porch after Guru Puja and Kirtan, and you hit the mridanga out there, and this black cloud form around it that land back. Yeah, it was
I
pretty
remember
cool.
the sun would rise in the background and be kind of misty over the trees. And it just kind of like a Mayapur kind of feeling to it. It was
I
quite
think there will
something.
ever be a place. Oh, and remember right before we
And
left
of course,
that
there was always the road.
The road was, I tried to drive
That-
out there actually a
There
few
were-
months ago. Go ahead.
Mm. No, go ahead.
No, I wasn't
No, I was just-
returning from Wisconsin, and I thought, let me drive out and see. And man, it was so far out in the boondocks. And I actually could not figure it. There's so many gravel roads, and there are probably a few added new ones back in there. I could not find out how to get there. So I never did make it. Not this time. I've been out there a couple of times since we left, but right before, I wanted to say this, right before we left the farm project, remember when Srila Gurudev came out? And I think you either came with him or maybe you were out there already. And we walked out on a little knoll in front of the apartment complex. We walked around different parts of the property, but specifically we got out on this knoll, little hill where the cows were pasturing. And Srila Gurudev says, let's build a temple right here. He says, we'll build an open air temple like they have in India. You know, we'll protect the deities, but everything else will be open and it'll be inexpensive and it'll be quick. He says, then we'll bring the deities here and install them. Remember this? He says, then there won't be any more talk about getting rid of this farm. Do you remember all that?
Yeah, that was a very key event. Yes.
That was
I
telling, but anyways. Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. That was really exciting.
I was going to say that
And-
that road between the upper and the lower house, that would separate the men from the boys. I remember a few temple presidents came, and then when it rained, they went, maybe this isn't for me. Because that road was treacherous.
Oh, that
When,
road, man.
when it was passable.
It would have such deep ruts in it. You would just line your vehicle up so that the wheels would bone the ruts, and then it would just slide down like a toboggan or something, or like one of those. I mean, it was like you had no control once you got on that dirt road. You had to get in the ruts.
and you couldn't get back up. You couldn't get back up the road. Yeah.
The Gurudev came out and he would like to ride the horses sometimes. I've got some pictures.
That was a very special place. The water was phenomenal there.
He
Oh,
put
I
on,
remember.
go ahead. Oh, the
No,
water.
I was going to say, I always got the horse that wasn't fully trained. Were you on that trip when that horse went wild on me and tore me through the trees and went a quarter mile through until the saddle fell off, and I just fell off at the very last minute and couldn't walk for a week.
Anybody who didn't have something like that happen out there. I mean, I broke my wrist riding a horse, and I couldn't put up a goatee for 6 months.
Half my stories always end up with me almost dying.
But Srila Gurudev also, he was out riding a horse, and Garuda was in charge, and supposedly put him on the best of the riding horses. And somewhere or another, these horses were none of them were the best of riding horses.
Nope.
And as soon as they had any indication that they might be heading back to the barn, they would want to run just to get back there. And one of them took off running and nearly knocked Srila Gurudev off by going right under a low branch. And he was very upset. In fact, upset enough that he sent Garuda back to Dallas and said, "You can't
Okay.
manage the horses."
I was always worried about that. Wow. I didn't know that. I just know that I was always terrified after my experience, because that's exactly what happened to me, or I mean, much worse.
I mean, when Gurudev was out there, I actually fell off a horse and You know, it actually, I didn't get it checked at the time, but it broke my wrist and I couldn't do anything
Oh.
for months.
I was so lucky I didn't get more severely injured myself. I have a question here I want to answer. People are asking what the columns in Dallas are made of. The columns are predominantly made of a casting plaster known as hydrocal, although a few parts were made out of polyurethane resin. The polyurethane resin was very hard to work with and would destroy the molds very quickly. So we turned over mainly the plaster. So all the column parts for the most part are plaster. Anyway, I just wanted to answer that question. Sorry to interrupt.
I think you
They're
were
solid.
something about a wood finish, and that's
Yes.
why these people that
That's right.
finish with
Yeah.
a wood finish, but not the material.
And most of the parts are hollow, except the lions are solid and a few of the smaller upper parts are solid, but most of the parts are actually hollow. There's a lot of 5-gallon buckets inside some of them. And then some of the molds were very difficult to make pieces from because of the size, like the larger lower parts. We would have to bring them in like we were carrying somebody on a palanquin. And I don't remember, because I was the assembly part. I just remember that casting some of those pieces was very technically complicated.
Sorry, Gopal Prabhu, we interrupted you. Go ahead. You were saying something.
No,
Yeah,
that's good.
Again, I'll be right back.
Mhm. Trying to see if I have anything particular. Yeah, Gurudev would sit. We used to have this routine when Gurudev was away. We started this routine on the farm of before lunch, we all had these metal plates, and there were at least 20 men out there working on this apartment complex. So for the Sarya Vijayajal prayer, we'd all stand up like a bunch of wild Indians and start circumambulating the back porch with our spoons banging on the back of these metal plates. And it was pretty intense. I mean, there's a lot of passion and you know, amongst these young devotees. And Garuda particularly was so annoyed that we would do that. He would sit in the corner just with his arms folded and, you know, really look perturbed. And so when Srila Gurudev came, he actually brought it up to Srila Gurudev and said, you know, they're like, it's totally bogus what they're doing, this kirtan, you know, chanting like that. And so the first day Gurudev's back, he did come to the back porch and he stood in the doorway. He says, okay, let me see what he's talking about with this kirtan and banging of the plates. So we did our Sarya Vijayajal. We went around the room just Sarya Vijayajal. In fact, I've still got the plate. It's got all these dents in it. And Gurudev says, yeah, it's all right. You know, Gurudev was like totally fine. You know, he could see that these guys are just, you know, like wild animals. They got to let it out a little bit somehow.
Yeah.
And he was okay. So that kind of put
One of
Gurudev
the
at
things,
ease.
I'm sorry to interject here, because just for the sake of the devotees and posterity who are watching this, they may be wondering why we're talking about the Oklahoma farm when we're talking about the 50th installation of Shri Radha Kalachandji. We just want them to know that the two were intimately connected, that the farm and the temple were actually intimately connected. And that's why it isn't like, you know, we're talking about the 50th installation project. We're still on topic when we're talking about the farm. I just wanted to interject that so that, you know.
No, that's well noted. That should be noted because Srila Gurudev would, like I said, he would have the devotees from the farm sometimes come to Dallas to help on the project there.
Yes.
You know, we had to do Sankirtan different times of the year, which contributed to the maintenance and construction of Dallas Temple.
Right.
So yeah, they were highly integrated. They were all the same as was Houston,
Right.
you know, so.
And the farm was a retreat. The farm was where we had some fabulous Vyasapuj celebrations. And almost every devotee from the entire area would come, and we had hundreds of devotees on the farm for days for fabulous celebrations. So it was an important place for the devotees to come and get together and enjoy each other's company in Krishna consciousness.
Thank you.
It does, yeah, it represents, I mean, something that, Srila Gurudev had a vision of, a village there with cottage industries and, there'd be a two-story apartment complex with a lagoon and, I don't know, what was that, 20,000 gallon water storage tank with a,
That could have supplied a small town.
exactly. I mean, he was setting it up
Yeah.
for the future. And
We
then,
had
and
a-
it should be noted too, that he had, somebody else would know more than I do because I'm going by hearsay or what I heard, but, they decided on that particular property based on so many different things, whether the water tables, there was a spring-fed lake on the property. There was already an established pecan orchard. It was in a certain section where the trade winds, if there were nuclear wars and how it would affect. I mean, everything was taken into consideration, and that's how they came to pick this farm. So
it had adequate rainfall, which was rare in that part of the state country. Actually, it was inside the green zone. Also, it had a river running through it, which would always be
it
a
had
good
a
source
river
of emergency
bordering
water
the property.
for
Yeah.
navigation, etc. It had highlands, lowlands, a lot of very important
The
features.
fertility of the soil was unmatched anywhere.
Yeah, right. It like something like 12 feet of topsoil.
Also, all of that, all of those, all the things that you all did at the time, where you had the farm going and, things like that has inspired our current devotees to also get farmland now. And, now amongst our devotees in Dallas, we have more than 20,000 acres of land that they've acquired.
20,000.
It's amazing anywhere in the world to say that a community has 20,000 acres of land sitting in the hands of the devotees into the future. I mean, that's going to be a historic achievement that's going to be counted for something that's a 50th anniversary, gem also that has come out. But it's because you all had the farm at the time. There was this vision, that we should have a farm and the farm should be connected to the temple. And we do have a very small farm right now, which is our farm at Terrell in Texas. But here, these devotees have now gone out and bought all this land and are acquiring more and more land. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with something like 50,000 acres by the time they're done. They're just like on a roll right now. But thank you all for doing what you did, because that inspires the devotees of the time now. And I wonder what devotees of now will do to inspire the devotees of the future to do amazing things, And this is the power of Krishna consciousness that Srila Prabhupada actually bequeathed us by coming to the West. This is an amazing story. This is actually Leela in action, It's actually Leela.
Yeah. Thank you, Nityananda Prabhu. Thank you for mentioning that. That's so true. Yeah, wonderful. And it's inspiring.
Yeah.
And Prabhu's, today's a travel day for me. We've got an event in a different city, so I've got to go. I've got things to prepare. But I am very, very honored that you have asked me to be here today. Thank you so much. And it's great to see some friendly old faces. I mean, old, you're not really old, yes.
We know what you mean.
You're getting there.
And some not so friendly old faces.
No.
So,
Friendly.
Dada, so this is our first conversation in about 25 years. So it's so good to see you.
Likewise, Prabhu.
And
Thank
Dr.
you.
Prabhu, we'd like you to come on again at some point, because we have some questions for you as well. And maybe we can connect offline and then reconnect online again. But
I'd be very happy to do that. And
in regard to entrepreneurship, because the Mark Maharaj had this very strong idea that Srila Prabhupada had, that devotees should not work for people, because you work for a Shudra, you become a Shudra, that, we should run our own businesses. Devotees should run their own businesses and support the temple and not be dependent on the congregation.
Yeah, no, I absolutely believe that. And I've been running my own business since, my wife and I have been running our own business since 1992.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and we show people how to run their business as a spiritual practice.
We'd love you to help us with that, because
I would love.
And,
I see that as part of my seva, to help devotees with that.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I'm definitely all in for that.
So I'm sorry you're leaving now, but at some point we'll ask you to come and join us again, maybe even for a dedicated session on just this
Yeah.
one topic. You know,
I would love to do that. I would love to do that. There's so many misconceptions about running, people running their own business. And there's things that, people, devotees and others just don't know. And then so therefore the business fails in a short while, or it just struggles for years and years. And it doesn't always have to do that.
And we have amongst us some, amazing, like for example, Yudhishthir Prabhu, I think he may be on the call. Yeah, I saw his name.
He was before. I saw him before.
He runs an amazing business, himself.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
a wonderful devotee.
He is.
Amazing devotee,
Yeah.
So it's very important for us as devotees to learn this and move forward in a way that's going to truly sustain this movement. We can't depend on others to sustain ISKCON,
I
ISKCON has to-
agree. I agree. One thing Tamal Krishna Maharaj used to say to devotees, I heard him say this multiple times. He says, you got to learn from the Mormons how they do it. Like there's so many Mormons that do business, they tithe to the church, and learn from their organization and how they do things.
Yeah. And
Not that we want to be exactly like them, but you can learn from everybody everywhere.
Absolutely, but they are one of the most organized religions on the planet. Amongst
Oh, yeah.
all the religions, they're probably the most organized.
Absolutely. Yeah, they probably are. Yeah.
And
that's much-
Prabhupada did say organization and intelligence. Prabhupada gave us those two words.
Yeah.
Organization and
Indeed.
So,
So
Thank
thank
you.
you again, Prabhus.
you.
See
Thank you,
you.
Dada.
So
So
nice seeing
to
you.
see you.
Likewise.
Extremely.
I will.
Come visit us.
We will.
I would
Yes,
love to
please.
do that. I'd love to come visit
Please
you.
Please visit us, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Hare
very much.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So those of us who are still on, if you have any, Gopal Prabhu, have you finished? Because I didn't even ask you to
Yeah.
finish. And,
I'm- if somebody has anything they want to hear about particular, I mean,
if anybody wants to ask questions, if you have any things you'd like to ask the two remaining speakers.
Oh, I have a question for Gopal.
Oh, wonderful.
Didn't we have the most sublime cows in the history of modern civilization on that farm?
oh, isn't it? Isn't it? I think about that all the time because I do go out and have a little interaction with our cows in Terrell now, recently. But I'm always, it's natural. I have this comparison in my mind
Sure.
about how it was there and how it is here. And I'm like, what happened here? What is the difference? How did, I remember our cows, they had horns.
Yes.
And I remember them running up, calling them and having them run up. And our neighbor, Don Reese, would be there. He was going to do some artificial AI. So they come running up and he's standing out there and he's like getting a little, afraid because they're charging right towards us and they got these horns and he's like
Nervous.
nervous.
He's not
And
used
they
to a
come
cow
up and they
charging him.
stop right in front of him and they just lift their head up like, okay, pet us on the neck. And he's like, oh, that's all, that's it. And that's all they were. There were times I would walk down to the pasture because I didn't have, my time might be running short and they'd be grazing out in the pasture down in the woods. And I just go out there and milk them, wouldn't tie them up, wouldn't have to shackle the legs, just milk right there on the spot. And there was like no problems.
I remember walking down the road one day and you were lying on top of the cow, stretched out in the sun. Just the two of you look so relaxed. Just
That's
taking
how
five.
They were pretty darn mellow. I just,
And the milk-
except.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the only cow that wasn't mellow was one that was given to us.
Oh, you mean the half beefer? Oh, no,
Yeah,
no.
might have been.
The,
and she
the
was
rescue
charged.
cow. The rescue cow, right. No, I was going to say their milk was 1/3 cream.
It was incredible. We always had a big pot of Shrikhan, a big pot of
And,
yogurt.
Maturapati would make so many amazing things out of that milk. He made buttermilk, he made cheese, on and on.
Oh, on
Amazing.
and
First
on.
time I ever had
We
buttermilk in my life, and I'll never forget it. Wow.
Get a farm. I mean, near the end of the tenure of that farm, we were close to self-sufficient as you could get, growing all of our grains, our chickpeas and beans and mung beans and, you know, all the milk products. We made sorghum for our sweeteners. We made our own butter. All
That
of
was
the
when-
vegetables, growing vegetables was a competition amongst devotees. I mean, we had so much going at that time.
Remember what we ate for about 2 years? Pecans.
Oh yeah, a lot of pecans. We had tons of pecans, but that was terrific. We had a pecan syrup for our homemade
Pecan
pancakes
pancakes,
and
pecan burfi, washed down with
pecan
pecan milk.
burfies all the time. That was wonderful. Yeah, it was pretty opulent living, I have to admit. And anybody who lived out there says the same as you did. Yeah, so that was their best. That was some of the best years of their life, living on that farm in Oklahoma.
I was at peace there. I was at peace. I was one.
You had I like that situation, working on the stained glass for the temple here in
Yeah,
the restaurant. You had your own thing going. We'd see you at lunchtime, see you at Mangal Arti.
that was the
And then
best.
You were absorbed, man.
That was the best 6 months of sadhana I've ever had. Fully engaged. I was so happy. I knew it wouldn't last. But on the way out the door, we got to build a cotton bowl parade float together.
That's a question on the list. How did Lord Garuda come to Dallas? You know, we have Garudaji on the back of the temple, looking at the details.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How did they come to Dallas?
I don't remember exactly. I do remember when he arrived, I was overwhelmed. It was purchased somewhere. It's like a classic Balinese style Garuda. I don't remember where, but you can purchase such items. And that was a particularly spectacular one. But no, I don't remember exactly. It was later. It was, you know, after the. Oh, and the very last thing that we did was the domes on the temple, the original domes. We built those up here in the sanctuary. And again, we were totally winging it. We had no idea what we were doing. But everybody wanted to get involved in that project because it looks so cool, as we did in the Dallas Temple Room. And I remember I was in the middle because I had long arms and I was pushing them up on the scaffolding and they came back on me and I almost lost that big dome for a split second.
Speaking to Krishna, I'm like, why have you put me here? You know, compared to Vrindavan, where you just hear chanting all over the place. And it's so peaceful and beautiful in Vrindavan, at least back then.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. I think Yudhishthira Prabhu had his mic on and is listening to some other class as well, probably. Go ahead, Yeshua.
There's a question about Sarabi Swami's involvement
Yes.
in the architecture. You know, I don't know. I mean, so what I heard is, you know, Srila Gurudev was very close with him and requested him to design our temple. And I know maybe you were out there then, yeah, so I don't know, but he actually lived on our farm for.
Yeah, I was his servant for a few weeks out there. When I first came to Dallas, the very first thing I did was come out to the farm, and I was with Sarabi Swami for a few short weeks. And he showed me all these drawings, and I of course, I wished I had a better memory about this, but I'm certain he designed the Dallas Temple Room because he has his own unique. He's expert at recreating like classic Vedic architecture, and he explained the different types of arches and so forth to me at that back then. And I can't imagine anyone else would have designed the Dallas Temple Room. And he was here right as its outset. So it's a very safe guess that you know that he designed the temple room. He made the drawings, drew all the various individual components, which were then carved by the same person who did the woodwork in Houston, and they did the Sringasan here in Dallas and other temple ISKCON projects. The same carvers carved the piece from which we made our molds, from which we made the castings, which then became all the pieces in the temple. I hope that clears that up. Sarabi Swami Prabhu designed the temple. I'm pretty sure that's a given. And we built ours before New Vrindavan. That's another given.
And even after, when ours was completed, this is the other story I heard. I was in Houston at the time, but Kirtanananda Swami came to Dallas.
Mhm.
And when he walked in the temple room, this is after that, I believe they had Prabhupada Palace completed at that time. Does Prabhupada Palace
Yes,
have
yeah,
some of the
yeah,
same
or
architecture?
near completed. It was functional then,
When
because
he
I went
walked
back for a
in,
visit.
when he
Go
walked
ahead.
into our temple room, he looked at Srila Gurudev and says, "You have outdone me."
Yes, yeah. That's right. So that's right. That's a
It
very
was
good.
expert. Gurudev really, really liked that temple room. I didn't spend a lot of time in Dallas when he was there, but he, I was told he always sat, and when I would be visiting, he would always sit in the temple room chanting japa, sitting on the floor. They used to put a little seat down in the front next to the coin box. They said he used to sit right there and just sit, and he'd have full view of the temple room. And he would always recommend, he would always say in his classes that, why wouldn't you want to chant in this temple room? How you can't look anywhere. Or he said, Satsvarup Maharaj said, you can't look anywhere in this temple room and not be reminded of Krishna.
The way I observe any good piece of art or architecture is it's like eye candy. Your eyes want to dance around and take in all, and it never gets bored with what it's viewing. And that's what the temple room does. It's a constant sort of, delight for the eyes, to be poetic. Even the shadows are perfect. The spaces between the objects are perfect. It's like good music. There's the note and then the space between the note. So just the gaps and the spaces between objects are perfect.
Actually, Satsvarup Maharaj had come on earlier on this same type of Zoom program, and he said it so much affected him that even today he looks at Sri Radha Kalachandji's picture and chants his full 16 rounds, looking at Sri Radha Kalachandji. That's how much the temple environment affected him. I mean, that's testimony. That's amazing testimony to this temple.
There's just something mystical about it. There's no way to put it. It's just some perfect combination of elements that's very rarely attained in architecture. Maybe that helps. I could say it a million ways, but I've seen a lot of beautiful buildings, and there's nothing that really quite hits that same note.
Right. Yeah. Garuda Prabhu once came to Dallas, and he often comes to Dallas. Well, in the past he did. Since the pandemic, we've not had much travel happening. But one day he came, and he'd gone to Houston Temple. The new Houston Temple had been built. It was very impressive. It's amazingly impressive temple.
I was just there yesterday. It's fantastic.
Oh, well, yeah. And so he came back and he said, Nityananda, I want to say something. He says, what I feel in the Dallas temple, I don't feel anywhere else. Yeah. And he said, please don't change it. Please don't leave it as it is. It is an amazing, it has so much energy from the past of all the wonderful devotees, all the way from the time when Srila Prabhupada was here till now, who have come to this temple and, express their love for Sri Radha Kalachandji and practice devotion at this temple, that this energy here is priceless, no matter what might happen anywhere in the world. But it's not going to be possible to replicate what's happening here. That's what he was saying, And I so much appreciated the fact that we have so much, and we sometimes don't realize it because it's right here, and we're here every day. We take it for granted, some of these things, But actually, this is something amazingly special that's going on, which is the Dallas Temple itself, and all the wonderful devotees like yourselves in the past who have done so much to bring it to the state that it is in now.
A devotee has asked what Srila Gurudev's involvement was with the temple.
Yes.
I have to say, first and foremost, having given this a lot of thought, it was so well planned out that there was no need, there were practically no, I don't know of any changes, frankly, whatsoever. It was so expertly planned and then executed. Srila Gurudev, of course, would constantly visit. If he was in town, he would come down multiple times a day. He would, of course, have final approval on anything. For example, there was a background, like a wall color. He would approve like the finishes or the upholstery or our flooring and a flooring pattern. He would always have final say, of course, but there weren't too many decisions to be made. And of course, but he would always egg us on, and I can remember many times if I had done an arch or so, he would say, okay, when I come back from Hong Kong, I want to see 2 more arches done, or I want to see more columns, or I want you to finish the floor by next week. You know, always setting nearly impossible goals, but you know, it would give us a impetus to hurry up. And the other thing about the temple room is the 8 B.G. Sharma paintings, which are, it's an unparalleled collection practically. And those were mounted first on the floor. We used very giant sheets of probably sailcloth or giant pieces of canvas. We adhered them to the canvas, and then we adhered the canvas to the walls. And then we created the moldings that are around the canvas, including a custom corner piece that's made out of epoxy that could be bent into the curve. And then when it was set up, now you have mold, you know, so and around the door frames, there's moldings everywhere that we got moldings, created molds of them, and then cast them. So there's an awful lot of molding and casting work there that can just be you won't notice it until you think about it.
I was going to also mention, when I was recently up in Wisconsin, I was visiting with Jayagopal, and he was telling how they would have meetings periodically. I mean, with Srila Gurudev to discuss, you know, the way that they were doing things. And there was one particular time he was recalling that Pashupati brought some samples of some wallpaper that were, I think he was saying they were going to go in the hallway. I'm not sure at that time, and nobody liked it. Srila Gurudev didn't like it. He says, no, you're not using that. It's not. And Pashupati, but he also respected, you know, Pashupati's artistic acumen. And Pashupati says, no, I will put it up. If you don't like it, I will pay for it. In whatever, I can't do his accent, but you know what I mean.
I will put it up.
So he put it up, and naturally everybody was stunned at how wonderful it looked. But he was saying that, you know, they had these meetings like that periodically, but.
See I wouldn't have been taking part in those sorts of meetings. I was just I was a production robot, the Bhakti robot, just chugging along, putting things together. So there was probably a lot more interaction between Gurudev, especially with Pashupati.
Definitely.
One would have to assume.
Nice. We actually have Yudhishthira Prabhu, I think, with us. I see him coming in and out. He might have wanted to make a comment at one point. I think that's why his mic was unmuted. But Yudhishthira Prabhu, if you're still there, you can hear us. You can chime in whenever you want, please. But let's continue. Yes. Anybody else has any questions? Yes, sorry. Somebody wants to say something.
These old, you know, in the earlier days, also in the early 1880s and 1980s, you know, all of the houses around here were in really disrepair. And, you know, I remember the first Vyas Puj that was in, I believe, in June or July of '79. You know, I had to come here from Chicago, and there were other devotees working on these old houses, just trying to put vinyl on the floors so devotees would have a place to lay out their sleeping bags when they're coming for the Vyas Puj festival. So there was always things like repairing these old houses going on, I'm sure, although I wasn't really fully living here at that time. But yeah, that was Srila Gurudev's call also, that I come down to assist with getting those things done. But it was so hot here. I don't think I was able to perform that well.
We briefly had a candle factory in one of these houses. Jayadev set it up again, and then one Christmas marathon, I was in charge of making the candles, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I made a couple dozen candles one day, and Gurudev came in and he said, okay, tomorrow I want you to make 50. So the next day I managed to make 50. And then he said, the next day I want you to make 100. And then he said 200. And at some point I couldn't keep up, but
that's with the carved candles.
Well, no, these were the mold candles, like poodles, and Jayadev had made them from various objects. But I just remember every day Gurudev came in and doubled the quota.
I was also involved with carving candles.
Yeah, that was the year before. Yeah, go ahead.
making a special out of beyond what the money was going to go to selling it for the. Anyways, long story, for the temple and everything else, I was able to keep $20,000 from just what I sold to personally give to Srila Gurudev, which I was requested to do.
Wow, that's a lot of
Yeah.
money.
Oh, it was intense. At
Huh.
that time, this was in Canada, Sankirtan, and I was on my own, working in a mall, living in a motel, selling candles from sun up until 10 o'clock at night for the Christmas season. And no, they were flying. All I did was go to the storage room and bring cases of candles. This is after we sat in Toronto for 3 weeks making the candles with several devotees. And that's a whole nother story. Stayed with Kratu and Draupadi, Kratu Das and Draupadi, his wife. And that was a great time. We used to go to the Toronto temple. But anyways, the selling the candles, yeah, they were selling. All I would do is bring candles, put them on the kiosk shelves, and then go get some more. And by the time I'd come back, they'd all be gone. I mean, they were selling like hotcakes.
That was a real that was a hot item there for a few years.
Hot item, and needless to say, I was a bhakta at that time. And it was, fresh out of the material world. It wasn't an easy thing to be doing. And I didn't have any association there.
Well, when I was initiated in October of 1980, I had just been working on the temple, but I had about $3 in my pocket, and I didn't realize one had to give Guru Dakshina in the form of cash. And Radhanath Prabhu was like, you got it. I said, I have $3. Radhanath Prabhu gave me $50 to give to Srila Gurudev, and I'll never forget that.
Is that Radhanath Prabhu's iPhone? Is it Ron's iPhone? Is it?
Yes, I believe that is.
So he may be listening in.
Yeah, and then he got me arrested, but that's another story.
Who designed the restaurant?
Yes.
That's got to be Pashupati, and I bet, and I'm sure Srila Gurudev and Pashupati discussed that. That would be my guess, because there was no real. I don't think there was a need for any elaborate drawings. It was fairly straightforward.
Another thing, Jagopal was saying that Gurudev wasn't so keen on the way he wanted to make the pillars in the restaurant, but that was another thing that once he did it and got them up, Srila Gurudev was really happy with it. And the flooring too. They had their doubts about the whole floor.
Well, the original floor didn't last long. It wasn't suitable for a commercial space, but it was beautiful. In fact, I had to refinish it about a year or two later. It was too porous for that type of environment, but it was very beautiful. But that thing you were talking about that you were roofing, the elevated seating area.
Yeah.
There was this giant thing. It was supposed to look like I can't remember the temple in Vrindavan. There's a temple shaped like this. Anyway, we call it the orange squeezer because that's what it ended up looking like. Like a giant orange should come down on top. Didn't quite have the Vedic architecture that it was supposed to. And it was extremely dangerous. It was like 5 tons of concrete suspended on a couple of those columns. But fortunately, it was taken down.
So the current floor that we have in the restaurant is what you had done at the time, Yashua Prabhu?
No, I don't. I believe that it was replaced. I'd have to double check that, but I believe the original floor it couldn't withstand the heat and cold changes, so it was changed to some more durable type of tile. But I might have done it and don't even remember because I didn't sleep a lot for 8 years.
Russia was just down here. He might know, but I thought that was the same, but they had replaced some of it. But I thought it was steel tile.
We replaced the tile in the courtyard because the freezing and warming just turned it into gravel, really. But
yes,
as far as I know, I think the tile in the restaurant is the original steel tile.
Oh, okay. It was beautiful. Yeah, and then when I replaced the tree, I had to expand around the fountain because there was a very constricted fountain around the original tree. It didn't give the tree enough room to breathe. So it was beautiful, but I had to jackhammer it up and then expand the perimeter. And I found those 3 little green things at some garden center, and they're still there painted green.
Yeah.
And the tree looks beautiful. That was that has to be almost 30 years ago
Yeah, it's
or
amazing.
more.
It is.
35, 6, no, it's as old as my daughter, like 36 years ago, 35 years ago.
I would, you mentioned Jagannath Ram designed those.
Oh, he did the celestial dances. He also did the fountains.
Exactly. I thought you should also mention that, those golden fountains on the altar.
Those brass fountains. And I went down to Fredericksburg to pick them up. And it was always an adventure to go to Jagannath Ram's house. I think his house caught on fire the first time. And the second time we were stuck in the middle of nowhere. And I do mean nowhere without a spare tire in the middle of the night.
Oh,
So we always seem to have our like Sudama Brahman moments whenever we were together. So I brought those to Houston where I polished them up with a grinder. And one day while I was polishing them away, Gurudev was up in the 3rd floor and he calls down, "Yeah, so get up here." So I immediately ran up the stairs. I entered his room and he looked at me, he goes, "How can you come before your spiritual master like that?" And so I had taken my safety glasses off, and when I looked in the mirror, I looked like some giant red-faced raccoon demon because my face was caked with polishing compound. Anyway, he didn't call me back into his room that day. So those fountains were a bit of work to get them to work. It took forever to calibrate the bending of the lotus so they didn't splash all over, and I had to cut one shorter because the lotus flower would start to swing back and forth wildly.
They're
Some
beautiful, aren't they?
ad hoc engineering there, but they did work for a while.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they're still beautiful. They are beautiful. Well, yeah, thanks for reminding me. I forgot about the fountains. And then the Vyasa San that Srila Prabhupada is in, that one we built in like the course of like 24 hours. There was the giant GBC Guru meeting. I believe it was the last meeting of the original 11 Gurus was held here in Dallas, and Gurudev wanted a whole bunch of things done for that. And I remember the whole gang of us was in that temple room all night till like the next noon, making that Vyasa that Srila Prabhupada is still on. And I think the artist Sham Sundar from India, who was making the other sculptures of nuclear state, I believe he did the lion's heads that originally graced the Vyasa-sans.
What about the domes above the altar?
Mm-hmm.
Did we crafted those together?
The original, they were in the we built them in the sanctuary. I know Nakula Das Brahmachari had a lot to do with them. I remember Pashupati established the concept as plastic that was then coated with like colored resin, and then we would assemble a row, and then I would cut the next row out of plastic and then lay them out, and then we would do the resin work on top of them, and then the next day put in that row and then create the next blank row, et cetera, et cetera. But that was a very fun project to do. So a lot of people got their hands on that one because in fact we probably had more volunteers than we had. There were time constraints to each step, but they were quite light and also kind of not that. It wasn't my choice, of course. They weren't very structurally stable, and that came back to haunt me about 20, 30 years later in the form of very severe chastisement. Well deserved. I'm very glad to see the new domes were done. I'm now allowed to sleep at night. Thank you for whoever got the new domes built.
Yeah. That was a wonderful endeavor. I see Yudhishthira Prabhu's camera is moving around. I'm wondering if Yudhishthira Prabhu, you can hear us. I'm thinking you might have something very important.
There he is.
Conversation. You're muted right now, Prabhu.
He's muted.
Still muted.
Still muted.
Yeah. Oops.
Are you I thought you were waiting for you to steer, Prabhu.
Yeah,
We
he
kind
is
of were.
coming on, but he's still muted. And he's trying to unmute himself, I think.
Go ahead. Fill in for us.
Those new domes were made by a man named Carl Trimble.
Mm.
And he was in his late 70s when he started, and we were just worried that he wouldn't last. But he did, and he was quite a character.
Okay,
And-
sorry,
and the-
everybody.
I'm sorry?
Hare Krishna. I missed part of it because I had a committed zone, but the Zoom on another Zoom, but this one is more interesting. I'm not sure if there was a question for me, but I wanted to share that this was very sweet. Yasomati Nandan Prabhu, you spoke eloquently. Gopal Prabhu, as always, Datta's expected to be that way. So just a wonderful, enthusiastic history. And what an opportunity that all of you were used as instruments by Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji, willing instruments. We're all used as instruments. The question is whether we're willing or not, or fighting it. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. You're also an important instrument that Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji used for the development of this temple. And what an amazing contribution you made and continue to make to the Dham. Thank you so very much. We're all much the richer having you with us, having you.
Same towards you, Prabhu. Haribol.
But Rasha Prabhu, did we cut you short here because you're still speaking, I think.
No, that's all I had to say. I was just going to tell you who built those domes.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, to find that person who did that, right? Because at one time it didn't look like we were going to find anybody. We were going to try it in a way that might not have worked out, and then we found somebody. And then, we had the help that we got from Hamsadutta Prabhu and company, that helped us. And of course, yourself as the person overseeing the whole thing to make it happen. It's just an amazing dome. I mean, how many times I've been told by people who have been visiting us, some really amazing leaders who have visited us. And one of them was Rompad Maharaj, and he was like very unhappy with the dome because it was breaking down, how the certain tiles had
Healing.
Yeah.
and so then, so then when he saw the new dome, he said, wow, this is amazing. He said it was worth waiting for.
They are really good.
So thank you.
I just visited Carl Trimble's website yesterday, and that's his that's the most prominent picture on his website. That's his
Wow.
pièce de résistance, his biggest life's work.
Nice.
Magnus opus.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice. So nice. I mean, how many different ways this temple is contributing to people's lives in a way that's so much impacting them that you can say that, God is here, you just feel like God is here.
It's really amazing to see the restaurant, the giant parking lot now, and how successful the restaurant is, and it brings people to the temple and brings people to Krishna culture. What a wonderful combination of house of worship and one of the best vegetarian restaurants in the world.
Yes. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, we do have another program coming up next week at the same time on the 14th. That's at 8:30 in the morning. There we have some of the first pujaris who actually served on the altar coming on and speaking about their experience. And I'm sure that's going to be very nectarian to hear as well, what they went through at that time when they started worshiping Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji for the first time. And it's going to be amazing to hear about that because, we don't have many photographs of that time, the original worship going on. There are some photos, and those photos create a lot of interest. People love seeing them, and they're like sort of iconic photographs, So it'd be nice to catch some more from people who might have them in their own storehouses and haven't given them to us yet. That would be so nice to get. All right, well, thank you all very much for attending this call about the 50th anniversary of the installation of Shri Shri Radha Kalachandji Ki Jai. And please join us again next week on the 14th, same time. Yasha Prabhu, we can't thank you enough for coming and being with us. And of course, right now, you're right here in the Dham.
Thank you.
We're hoping to hear so much from you this evening at the Sunday Peace program. And of course, Gopal Prabhu is such a mainstay in our temple that I don't think this temple will probably operate without him being around. How many things he does at this temple, all the times he wakes up the deities every morning to bring the milk in from the cows at the farm, and you name it. I mean, it's just amazing. All the wonderful cooking and the the burnt chickpeas, the list goes on and on and on. So thank you so much, Gopal Prabhu, for both of you speaking and saying for Dr. Prabhu, because he's not with us. Hare Krishna. Vanchakapaturvischa,
Antikopatubhischa,
Hitanam Pavanebhya, Vaishnavebhya, Namo Namah. Jai, Nitakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Kalachandji Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srila Gurudev Ki Jai, and all the wonderful devotees, all of you Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.